This is Shutters Inc. with Bruce Williams.
Hi and welcome to episode 498 of Shutters Inc. This is Bruce Williams from shuttersincpodcast.com, and joining me once again from Allentown in Pennsylvania, it is Mr. Joe Edelman. How are you, Joe? Hello,
Bruce. How are you?
Mate, I'm good. What's been happening?
You called. Where's Glenn this week?
He's out doing his secret squirrel stuff again.
Ah, okay.
He's got a gig for Tamron where he's, doing the promo photos for what will be the launch images for a new lens.
Got it. At least that's what he tells you. He probably gives that whole line. Like if he tells you what it really is, he'd have to kill you. Does he use that story? Is that it?
Probably is.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that's the tame version. So he's doing that at the moment. So we wish him well because our governments are so quick to change their minds on the ability of the populace to move freely around the place these days. It's anything can change on pretty much the flip of a coin. So I hope he's out there and being able to be productive and get shot what needs to be shot. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I kind of wish we had that not being able to move problem here in the U.S. Our governors are all jumping the gun and saying, hey, masks, social distancing, who needs that crap? Just go for it. So, yeah.
I saw Dr. Fauci come out yesterday and having a go at the governors, the state governors who are sort of relaxing the reins a bit too soon. And Fauci's basically saying, we've got to keep it locked down, otherwise we're going to have another wave.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, our numbers are on the rise. So they're doing this while the numbers are going up. And their argument is, well, yeah, but we've got vaccines coming.
Oh, jeez.
Okay. So,
yeah. But you've got 250 million people that need to get jabbed for that to be effective.
That's right. Yep.
Well, actually, I think your population is more than that now. I think you're closer to 300, aren't you?
Yeah, it's well over that, yeah.
Yeah, right. So, anyway.
So what's big in photography this week? That's depressing talk. We need to move on. I'm sorry. Go ahead. That's just...
what is big in photography this
Surely
week?
Sony came out with a camera, didn't they? They must have a new camera. Like, it's been what, 3 weeks since the A1? Come on.
Yeah, you would think so. There'll have to be rumours starting to circulate any day now about what's coming next.
I missed that. Right. Uh-huh.
So there are rumours of the specs for what will be the A7 Mark IV.
I can't keep track of them. What do they have, like 18 or 19 full-frame cameras now? I mean, like, who does that? Who needs that?
I honestly couldn't tell you how many models there are, but yeah, there'd be quite a few.
I think at the end of the day, the marketing people at Sony are going to go down in history as the most brilliant marketers ever.
Yeah, right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. They make before I get all hate mail and we get in trouble. Sony makes great gear, gang. Don't get mad at me, right? I'm not trying to be snipey because I'm a brand ambassador for a different company. Just keeping it real, though. Like, what do you possibly need with that many cameras? Like, what you got is a company with a brilliant marketing team.
Definitely. And I guess, it's a company that doesn't have to rely on its photographic arm for
sure.
its bread and butter.
That's correct.
They make so much money out of their film division, out of their PlayStation, business, their gaming side. They've got so many fingers in different pies that they can probably afford to be a little bit of a loss leader on the camera side. And I don't know if they are, but I'm saying they could if they needed to be.
Sure.
And
keep in mind too, their cameras are in a large part also proof of concept for their sensor development, which they in turn sell to other companies.
Yeah.
So again, brilliant company. Like I don't mean to any of this as a put down. It's meant to be lighthearted, but indeed they do make an awful lot of cameras that people seem to be really excited to have multiple versions of. So
I know. I mean, I'm on, one of the Sony alpha groups on Facebook, and the number of times I see people saying, I've just, bought the latest thing that Sony's released, and I've relegated my 12-month-old camera to second shooter position, and the camera that I bought 12 months before that's going in the dustbin kind of thing. It's like, really?
Indeed,
my A850, I shot with that for 10 years, and it's still a great camera even today. I very rarely get it out of the drawer, but it's still a great camera. And the only reason I updated was because the low noise capabilities of the newer sensors just absolutely left my A850 for dead. And I really appreciate being able to shoot at higher ISOs and not have, so much noise that you can't stand to look at the images. So,
indeed.
Anyway. What is new in your world, Mr. Edelman?
Honestly, that's about it. Just plugging along, teaching online class. It's still the same, man. I feel so. Full disclosure, I had a birthday today. Oh, and I'm not going to lie though, I'm kind of irritated.
Happy birthday!
I feel, especially at my age, given the way the last year has gone, because literally like today, last year, I was standing in front of 300 people delivering a keynote speech in Florida. So I've just decided, the way that I am squaring this all off and just coming to peace with it, I want a refund on 2020. I want a year back.
Totally.
It's like, this is just not working for me. It's just not. So, but no, other than that, I'm finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I've actually booked my first in-person speaking engagements, which won't happen until August of this year.
Yep.
But, and ironically, of all places, it's in Texas, where they just eliminated the mask law. Of course, that decision was made the day after I signed the contract to do this speaking engagement. So, hopefully I will be able to get my vaccination before then. But, so I'm feeling, good about the idea that, all right, I'm going to start to, at some point we've got to get back out into the world. I understand people wanting to get back to normal. But it's intimidating. It's kind of scary. Even with a vaccination, it doesn't prevent you from getting COVID. It just makes sure you're not going to die.
It just minimizes the impact,
Right. So I'm in no rush to get it, period. But at the same time, I can't spend the rest of my life, sitting in front of a microphone. So we'll, kind of looking forward to the end of the year to try and get things back on the road. Well,
yesterday I booked my airfare to fly to Western Australia to try and this is my third attempt.
I was going to say, when is that for? That way we know when Australia's going to shut down again.
Yeah, exactly. So flying out of Sydney on Good Friday over to Perth. I'll be over there by lunchtime, and then pick up a hire car and drive out to the town where my family are located, which is about 2.5 hours drive out of Perth.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
And then basically just spend Saturday and most of Sunday there, and then Sunday afternoon drive back to Perth, and then Monday morning jump on a plane back to Sydney. So that's Easter Monday. Right. Get home Monday night, and back to work on Tuesday.
If this trip gets rescheduled, you need to go on television and start proclaiming that you have predicted the shutdowns, every one of them, successfully.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we'll wait and see what happens. It's a long way to go for such a short period of time, but unfortunately it is what it is. So, yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, I saw on Twitter this morning Adobe promoting Adobe Max for this year.
Online and virtual.
Yes. So I thought we'd give them a brief mention. It'll be October 26, 27 and 28 of 2021 for anyone who wants to visit virtually. I will put the link in the show notes. And and David Marlin sent us a couple of stories. One about NFTs, non-fungible tokens. For those who are not up to speed, it's basically it uses blockchain technology, and it is a token which cannot be transferred to another entity. So once it's been sold to somebody, actually, I don't even know if that's right. Do you know, Joe? Like, once you have an NFT, surely you can sell it on to somebody else. It just means you can't keep it at the same time. Is that right?
I believe that is correct. Yes, the actual inner workings of it, I would not even attempt to make it sound like I know what I'm talking about. I'm probably just a step ahead of those people that still think, "Ooh, it's all that dark web voodoo stuff." So I at least understand what they're trying to do and where they're trying to go with it, and very minimally how it works. But the actual workings, I'm not sure.
So the great concept of the blockchain is what's called a distributed ledger. And basically what that means is, if you think of a traditional database that any company might keep on all of its clientele and its customers and all that sort of thing, that is basically one database of information that lives in one place. It lives on one server, presumably at the company that owns it. And if that server gets hacked, then the information that's contained in that database can be, broken apart, disseminated, sold, whatever, or corrupted. The beauty of a distributed ledger, which is what what blockchain technology works on, is the idea that every single person who's involved in the transactions, not just in a transaction, but anyone who's ever used the blockchain, they're all carrying a small part of the public distributed ledger. And so every time a transaction occurs, it basically gets verified against everybody else's copy of the ledger. Which sounds like, hang on, surely that means moving, gigabytes and gigabytes of data, but it actually doesn't because of the way it's encoded and broken down. So the beauty of this is that it cannot be hacked. Having said that, there have been one or two, quite high-profile stories like Mt. Gox, which was a Bitcoin repository that did get hacked, but I don't know the ins and outs of how that happened. But the idea of all of this stuff is that it can't be hacked. And the idea of these NFTs is that they are now starting to be used for the sale of digital assets, i.e. artwork and or music, and presumably eventually movies as well. Anything you want to add on this, Joe? Because I feel like I'm sort of dominating the conversation here.
No, I mean, that's okay. I actually, you've kind of put a couple pieces together for me. Like I said, my understanding is kind of more at like the 50,000 foot level. I think that it's very interesting, and I think that it's fascinating, and I would encourage any photographer, myself included, because I need to bring myself more up to speed. I would encourage any photographer to not ignore it. However, that said, it's not going to impact or have any value on 99.9% of camera owners in the world for quite some time. Yes. And the reason for that is, at the end of the day, this is something that will first benefit if it continues to take hold and if it continues to grow. And the early indications are it will first benefit artists who, and notice I'm using the word artists, not photographers, because it's going to benefit people who are doing things that are truly unique, outside the box, revolutionary. Most people with a camera cannot claim that successfully. So remember, when it comes to art, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There are people that will spend millions and millions and millions of dollars for a piece of art. And for anybody that is, interested in getting a little bit more of a sense in terms of how does that part of the art world work, HBO has a film called The Price of Everything. Check that out. It's nothing about NFTs, but it kind of gives you a sense of the thought process of how art is valuated, and also, you'll see firsthand some of the stuff that is getting valuated at these insanely high prices. Some people are going to love it. Other people are going to stand there and scratch their heads and say, what the hell is that? So beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right?
Yep.
I think, to me, what I like about it is the plan where if you are the creator of something and you create something and you are able to sell it via an NFT, you will essentially, the current plan is, you will essentially own 10% of that piece of art in perpetuity forever. So in the art world today, the traditional art world, you could create a painting, sell it for $50,000. 10 years down the road, if that painting sells for $5 million, you get zero, nothing. The person who purchased it from you gets the $5 million. You have no claims on profits made from that art. So the idea here is that the creator is essentially attached to this piece forever. I think that's a fascinating concept. And honestly, I think the music industry is going to be where we're going to see people jump all over that really, really quickly.
So are you saying that if an NFT gets sold on the secondary market, so after the creator has sold it to buyer number one, if buyer number one sells it to buyer number two, whatever
the creator
buyer
still
number
gets 10% of that sale price, the second sale price, whatever it is.
And that continues in perpetuity.
That is correct. Every time the
so
art
it's like a royalty.
Hands. Yes, exactly. That's why I think that the music industry is who's going to jump in on this big time.
Totally.
And then, of course, we also have to factor in, and kind of like Bitcoin, of course, has gotten the attention of many governments, including like our government here. There comes a point where the governments of the world, who, of course, hold the money, are going to say, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You can't be taking all of this money out of our economy without us, attaching something to it. So at some point, we've also got to be realistic that governments are going to get involved.
Yeah.
And, realistically, let's face it, they probably should, because in theory, if we took all the money out of, the government cycles, then we'd have a big problem on our hands.
Yeah.
So, I think it's exciting. I do think it's exciting because it's people thinking outside the box. It's people that are doing it in a way that does actually benefit creators, because we all know as a creator, it's not the easiest thing in the world to make money, especially not as an artist per se. When we're talking about being a portrait photographer or a wedding photographer, that you're fulfilling a need and providing a service. An artist that's truly just creating something that's unique and it's different, that hopefully someone will want to put up on their wall and admire, that's a much harder path to take. Yeah. So the idea that we're thinking outside the box and we're looking at something that is obviously not just satisfying financial people, but also satisfying the artists, I think is wonderful. I just think it's too early to get excited. You read the articles, even the article that you sent me the link to, you see some of the numbers that are thrown around and this guy drives a Lamborghini. And it's like, in that sense, it's no different than any old-fashioned multi-level marketing scheme. And I'm not saying that's what it is, but it's no different in the sense that the first adopters are always the ones that are going to have the big stories to tell.
Yeah.
So we need to give it some time. We, I think, need to be thankful that there are people with crazy amounts of money that will throw it around to see what they can turn it into.
Yep.
So I think it's got some potential, but definitely I would encourage photographers, don't ignore it. At least pay attention so that if we get to a point where there's critical mass and it's worth getting on board, then at least you know what you're looking at.
Yeah. It's interesting because I did see somewhere in that story mention of it having all of the hallmarks of a Ponzi scheme.
Sure.
But I agree with you. I think it's early days and it behooves all of us to, even if you're not involved, at least be on the sidelines and watching and paying attention to what is happening in the space, because I still scratch my head at the concept of Bitcoin. Not only because it's a challenge to fiat currency and governments are not going to let that go without
Right.
getting their hands on it, as you said a few minutes ago. But also because it strikes me, certainly in the current environment, that it's never going to be a valid form of currency because it is too volatile. You don't want to be, using a Bitcoin today to buy a pizza like the guy 10 years ago, to then find out that tomorrow that Bitcoin could have bought you a house. Right. That kind of volatility renders it useless as a currency.
Right.
So I kind of see it more as just another investment instrument at this point in time. But again, you just got to keep your eye on the ball, I guess. I'd like to break into the podcast briefly to mention that we now have a Patreon account. If you get any value at all from our photographic giggle fest each week, we'd really appreciate it if you could spare a couple of bucks a month just to help keep the servers running. The link will be in the show notes. Much appreciated. Now, back to the podcast.
And I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen in the news, we've been going through the whole craze here with the stock market and the stocks from GameStop, which were being shorted by all the hedge funds.
Yep.
And, some financial whiz on Reddit, of all places, starts telling people, hey, go buy this stock and we can make a ton of money. Well, the great part of it is the first people on board that actually understood what they were doing, they did. They made a ton of money. They got in, they basically blew this whole thing up. But the problem is then everybody else comes along that doesn't really understand it, but they're reading all these headlines that are, oh my God, buy GameStop, I can be rich.
Yep.
And those people lost money that they couldn't afford to lose.
Yep.
So
they're stuffing the wallets of the first adopters.
Right. So I agree with the people that support what happened via Reddit. I agree with the people behind Bitcoin and the people behind the NFTs. I mean, we should always be looking for, better ways to be doing things. But unfortunately, I don't know that society will ever get to a point where all things are even. I don't know that that's actually possible with humans.
No.
So, there are going to be people that will have more than others, that will be richer and wealthier and smarter. And I don't know that that's going to change with the evolution that is yet to come. So I think that just the idea, at least, that we're looking at these options and looking at ways to, I guess my thing for NFT, the only reason it piques my interest is because it does benefit the creator.
Yeah.
That is unique and novel. And so I see that as a potentially great evolutionary step for art, where it's, it's not only finance, but it's also for artists.
Yeah.
Whether it be music, painters, photographers. So to me, that's where it's like, okay, let's keep an ear on this because that's kind of cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. The idea of the perpetual royalty is, that in itself is one step that goes beyond anything that we've currently got. Because, you can go into a music store and buy, a piece of vinyl or a CD or whatever, and you've supported the artist in a small way because they get maybe 5% of the retail cost of, that piece of vinyl or that CD. Right. But that's the last, bit of financial retribution they're going to see from that particular sale. You could then take that piece of vinyl or that CD to a secondhand music store and sell it on because you're in financial distress. But none of that transaction goes back to the artist. It just goes into the pocket of the guy running the shop you sold it to. So the idea of this, perpetual royalty attached to the NFT is fantastic. I think that's a great step forward and something that, we've been missing for a long, long time. So, yeah. Exciting times ahead.
Indeed. It'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, so I will put the link that David Marlin sent us on that story in the show notes for those that want to check it out.
Cool.
And the other story that David sent to us was about an artist, Hoda Afshar, who has created an installation here in Australia, down in Victoria, outside St Paul's Cathedral in Melbourne, of basically these 3D printed busts of whistleblowers from various, cases and stories here in Australia. All of these busts were created by first photographing the subjects. Now, it says on 110 cameras. I'm assuming that means 110 film style cameras. I'm assuming they didn't mean 110 cameras. I'm assuming it meant cameras that use 110 film. That's my understanding. I might be completely wrong. I don't know. And then using those photos to then generate these 3D... What do they call... Do they call it a recipe for a 3D printer?
Actually, I'm not sure. But, as I'm looking at this, Bruce, I actually think it might have been 110 cameras in order to create the depth. Right. Okay. But the article is not clear, so I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I did. I'm just looking for it in the text. I know I saw it there earlier, and now I can't.
I saw it. It mentions it in a caption of one of the photos.
Oh, is it in one of the captions?
Which is what makes me think that maybe, indeed, it is actually 110 cameras.
Yeah, Afshar photographed her subjects using 110 cameras. But that could also mean cameras that you shoot 110 film. 3D printed busts of each person using that data. I can't remember what the term is. I don't think it's recipe, but there is a name for
here it is. It's in the article. All the way down at the bottom of the page.
Really?
She flew each person to Melbourne to photograph them using a system of 110 cameras, which allowed her to essentially create a 360-degree portrait. She used the composite image to generate a 3D printed sculpture of each whistleblower. See, it would help if you read the article.
Glenn and I say that all the time.
There you go. And then here, I'm all about hows and whys and solving problems. So it goes on to say she was fascinated to discover that the one thing that the 110 cameras could not capture was the details in her subject's eyes, which resulted in kind of a glazed over effect, which is why the images all look like a little eerie. Yep. It goes on to say this accidental byproduct of the process had a certain poetic resonance for the photographer. It reminded her of the eyes on ancient Greek busts.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that. They did very much look like, ancient Greek busts that you would see in a museum, because the eyes are simply just, they're smooth as eyes should be, but you don't see the colours that we would see when we look at either a photograph or a painting of somebody's eye. But anyway, interesting. Interesting.
That
concept.
Is very cool.
Yeah,
that is very cool.
So, what have you been talking about this week with your Tog Live chats?
Oh, gosh, what do we do this week? I had an interview with the guy. He's a friend of mine. I say friend in the sense that I've known him for a few years. We cross paths a lot at photography trade shows here in the U.S., but he likes to describe himself as the most famous photographer in Oklahoma that nobody has ever heard of. And I took it a step further because I think he undersells himself a little bit. So I declared that he is probably the most famous photographer in the world that no one has ever heard of. His name is Robert Trawick.
Right.
He's just a super awesome guy. He's been a photographer for 30 plus years. He kind of first learned the trade in the United States Air Force. He was a combat photographer, and now he does the grind, really. He's not like some epic, iconic photographer, but he's a guy that does portraits and weddings. He runs workshops. He does a lot of teaching, and he is just a ball of energy. He is a great guy. He's the kind of guy that will, do anything to help people out. And so I really appreciate his work ethic for the community. I think that's where him and I kind of have a lot in common, and we have a mutual admiration for each other. For me, I'm at that point in my career. I've been lucky. I've been able to do this my whole life. So I'm really trying to give back and make sure that I leave behind a knowledge base of information, and just to help current photographers, really avoid the mistakes and really improve. So that was this week's. And then next week's the scary one. Part of the reason why I interviewed Robert is I needed him to do me a favor. And that is that my listeners on Talk Chat have been asking for a while to say, we want you to interview yourself. I'm like, well, that would just be weird, but maybe I could have somebody interview me. And so I had the folks in my Facebook group submit questions.
Yep.
And I took those questions, sent them over to Robert, and said, okay, use whichever ones you feel like using, and whichever ones you don't, I'll make it a point to record a little video for the Facebook group, and I'll answer the ones that don't get answered. So we also recorded an interview with him interviewing me.
Nice.
And answering all these questions, which was it was kind of fun. But yeah, so that's been it. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out this whole podcast thing. I don't have quite the experience that that you guys do, but it's coming along, and I'm getting there. I will tell you one photo thing I saw this week. So here, since we were looking at pictures where the eyes were kind of weird, and we're talking about all that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's hit the news down there yet, and I don't know if this website is particularly big in Australia, but it's been all over the news here the last week, and more importantly, it's been all over TikTok. Because if it ain't on TikTok, it ain't happening, right?
Right.
So it's the website called MyHeritage, or myheritage.com. It's one of those websites where you can join up, and unfortunately it's kind of expensive, but you can use your DNA and you can track your family tree and put together your whole family tree, that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
But they have used some artificial intelligence, and it's freaky. And you can upload an image of like a deceased relative, and it could be a really old image. And it enhances the photos, but also essentially kind of brings them to life.
Okay.
And literally like changes, in a video, it allows them to smile and look around the room. So it completely animates the person's image, which is just amazing. So they call it deep nostalgia.
Right.
That's what they call it at myheritage.com. And I'll make sure I'll send you the link when we're done so you can post it.
Okay.
They have like a whole gallery of samples and that. But yeah, you can upload a still picture of someone dead or alive, doesn't matter. But this technology then animates that picture.
Wow.
And I got to tell you, you see all the stuff all the time about deep fakes and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
This is that technology, like, really coming into its own. And for me, at least, this is the highest quality of this kind of, shall we say, deep fake. I hate to make it sound bad because it's actually kind of really neat, but certainly you can imagine this could be used in a lot of really crazy ways.
Yeah.
So you can do it for free.
Ways.
You can sign up, for a free account, upload your picture, and it's amazing. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. So it's kind of worth taking 10 minutes and just playing with it just to see it and to maybe understand a little bit about, like, just look at what we're going to be able to do, down the road.
Yeah.
And yeah, there will be good and there will be bad, but nonetheless, it's kind of cool.
Now, I don't know if it was related to myheritage.com or not, but I did hear Leo Laporte this week, either on This Week in Tech or on This Week in Google, talking about, I think it's a commercial that's been made in the US where they've animated the face of Abe Lincoln.
I think actually that was part of the MyHeritage thing.
Right.
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, I saw that. So right now here in the U.S., all of this kind of facial AI and deepfake stuff, it's all over the news right now because there's also there's a series of video clips that have been making the rounds on TikTok that are of Tom Cruise.
Yes,
and if you pay really, really close attention, the voice is a little off.
Right.
But like when you're watching it, man, it's Tom Cruise. There's like no doubt you're watching Tom Cruise. Okay. And then finally the guy behind them, I guess, kind of gave himself up to say, let me show you what I've been doing, and actually showed you how in the videos, it's him.
Wow.
And he's adding Tom Cruise's face. And he does a really, really good Tom Cruise voice impression, but it's not perfect.
Right.
Right. So if you're really paying attention, that's kind of the giveaway. His voice is slightly higher pitched than Tom Cruise, but it's amazing.
Yeah, right.
And basically, he's filming these clips, and then he's taking Tom Cruise's face and basically, patching it over top of his and blending it and animating it, and it's incredible. And I'm sure, realistically, it's probably some of the same technology that MyHeritage is using and vice versa. While I'm sure there's different people working in this in different ways, I'm sure lots of it overlaps by now.
Yeah, right.
So it's pretty cool. But when you look at these MyHeritage ones, even like the one that's on their website, the first one that you see, it's a black and white shot. Originally of a couple, a man and a woman, and they zoom in on a close-up of the woman's face, and instead of just, static, she's moving her head all around, and she's looking in different directions. So her head, her mouth, her eyes are all changing, and even the catch lights in the eyes move according to where she's looking.
Wow.
So, it is amazing. Like, she dips her head down and the catch lights slide up to the, the top edge of the eyeballs and everything.
Wow.
So, yeah, we're talking some pretty crazy stuff. So, I mean, obviously, I don't think it's kind of necessarily a big impact on photography, but it's just kind of fun. It's cool to see, what we're able to do with technology we have. And I think if nothing else, it's just a reminder to photographers, don't be a dinosaur. Think outside the box. Imagine what can be. Because to me, actually, I think the coolest thing about photography today, and I know not everybody thinks this way, but I think the coolest thing about photography is that the only limitations that I have are indeed my own imagination. If I can imagine it today, I can create it.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's awesome. I mean, how cool is that? Right?
Yeah.
Because to go back 30 years ago, shooting film, that certainly was not the case. Not unless you had an unlimited budget and resources.
Yeah.
Today, if I can imagine it, I can create that image. It's possible.
Yeah.
So I think this kind of stuff, again, doesn't change the photography world, but definitely worth paying attention to because this gives you a sense of possibilities, and that's kind of neat.
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie Gattaca?
I did not, no.
So, I mean, it's probably I'm going to say a 15, maybe even 20-year-old film now.
Okay.
But it was set in well, I don't know if it was dystopian, but it was set in the future.
Oh, well, there you go. That's the problem right there. I didn't do sci-fi.
It had got to the point of everyone had to be careful not to leave traces of their DNA anywhere because it could be used to, nefariously incriminate you in a crime that you weren't a part of or whatever. And so you had these cases where people would make sure that they, vacuumed up the area where they were sitting so they weren't leaving dead skin cells and hair follicles and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of think about where we're headed with, it was a massive game changer to be able to, and certainly the porn industry did this probably the best, to take somebody's face and impose it on somebody else's body in a photographic image and make it look like, hey, pick your favourite starlet and here she is doing whatever you wanted to do kind of thing. Yep. That was bad enough. But now we're at a point where this can be done with video, and it kind of opens the floodgates for how do you defend yourself if someone takes your image. You take any one of us like you or me who are in the public sphere whose likeness can be found all over YouTube, and that, can then be taken from YouTube and extracted, and we could then, have our faces mapped onto some crazy gunman running through the streets of the city or whatever. Well, and then suddenly someone's claiming Joe Edelman went on a shooting rampage through the streets of Allentown, and how do you defend yourself from that?
Yeah, well, that's what all the news channels are talking about here, because when they're showing this off, they're like, what's going to happen when we get this to the point that it's so seamless that law enforcement
Can't
tell the difference. And it's not just video, Bruce, it's audio. So I use
totally,
in order to generate transcripts from like my YouTube videos and my podcasts and all that type of thing, I use a program from a company called Descript.
Yes,
and
you mentioned that.
I can upload my audio, and it's going to give me a transcript of it and everything. And then I can look at it and say, you know what? I don't know why I answered that question that way. I want to change the answer. So when I first signed up with this service, I had to spend the best part of an hour. I think I got to 50 minutes. You can do it in as little as 20, but you get better quality the longer you read. And they have a script that you read into a microphone, and it records you. And it's like, imagine narrating a National Geographic special. That's what the script is, like literally, okay?
Right.
So you read this script, and they keep encouraging you, the longer you go, the better quality we're going to be able to get. And so if you have a sentence that you want to completely eliminate that sentence but change what you said, you highlight the sentence, delete it, and then at your cursor, you type in the words that you want to be there, and you click overdub, and it puts my voice into the script. And it's not perfect. I mean, obviously, since I know my voice and I know my speech patterns, it's not perfect with the speech patterns. But I'll tell you what, if somebody doesn't know me, it is 100% convincing.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's not only just video, but it's audio capability as well. Yeah. On one hand, it's really cool. On the other hand, absolutely, there is the potential for a lot of problems to come up.
For misuse,
Sure, totally.
Wow. Crazy times we live in, Mr. Edelman.
Yep, indeed. Indeed. And then your partner's off somewhere just, doing whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Hopefully he'll be back next week and he can tell us all about what he did. So,
There you go.
Well, mate, thank you once again for stepping in.
As always, my pleasure.
Mate, it's great to have you. Always a joy to talk with you. And I hope everything, stays on track through until August and you can actually get to your speaking engagement in Texas.
You and me both. It's going to be an interesting ride, but fingers crossed.
Sounds good, mate. All right, well, you take care and we will hopefully talk to you again soon.
All right, Bruce. Have a great week. Take care.
You too, mate.
Shutters Inc. Another audio2you.com quality podcast. For questions, comments, and feedback, email theboys@shuttersinpodcast.com.